Stop scrolling right now because what you are about to hear will completely change the way you see love, loyalty, and betrayal, and before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because stories like this open your mind in ways no regular content ever will, and I promise you this one will stay with you long after the video ends. So listen closely as I tell you the story of a mother who discovered a truth so brutal that her response shattered the man she once called her son, and it all started with a simple visit that was supposed to be full of hugs, family dinners, and warm smiles but instead turned into a nightmare she never imagined in her darkest thoughts because when she landed in the city and took a taxi to the hospital just to check in briefly on her daughter-in-law, what she saw behind that ICU glass was not just a sick woman, it was a soul abandoned, alone with machines breathing for her, hands cold, heart weak, and eyes half closed as if even life itself was preparing to give up. And the worst part was that the room was empty not just of visitors but of love, no husband, no comfort, no familiar voice whispering that everything would be okay, and as the mother stood there frozen in the hallway, she felt something inside her crack because she had trusted her son to be the kind of man who would stand by his wife in moments like this, not disappear into selfishness, not vanish into pleasure while someone who loved him fought for every breath, but when she called his phone again and again, there was no answer, only silence, only the sound of the hospital machines and the slow, painful beeping that felt like a heartbeat echoing in her chest, and when a nurse quietly told her that no one had visited the patient all day, not even the husband, something inside her turned cold, not hot with rage but frozen in a way that only deep disappointment can create, and that was the exact moment her psychology changed. Because she stopped seeing her son as a child she raised and started seeing him as a man who had a choice and chose wrong, and instead of screaming, instead of crying in public, she walked outside the hospital and made one quiet decision that would change everything. She picked up her phone and traced the location of the car she had gifted him months ago out of love, out of pride, out of a mother's hope, and when she saw the location stop at a nightclub, her hands began to shake but her voice remained steady because something inside her had shifted from emotional to strategic. And when she arrived there and saw the car parked casually like it had no shame, she did not walk in and cause a scene, she did not drag him out by his collar, instead she did something far more powerful, she picked up her phone and reported the vehicle as stolen. And in that single quiet action she set a psychological trap that would not just hurt him but force him to face the reality of the life he was living, because sometimes the strongest revenge is not loud, it is silent and calculated. And when the police pulled him over later that night with laughter still in his voice and music still in his ears, reality hit him like a wall because in a matter of seconds he went from feeling like a king to being treated like a criminal. Confusion turned into fear, fear turned into anger, and anger turned into panic. And as he sat in the back of a police car staring at flashing lights, he had no idea that the woman who had always protected him was the same woman who had finally decided to teach him the most painful lesson of his life. And while he was being processed, questioned, and held, his wife was still lying in that cold ICU room with only strangers watching the monitors, and the mother went back to that hospital and sat next to her daughter-in-law, holding her hand, whispering words she should have heard from her husband, promising her silently that she was not alone. And in that quiet room something powerful happened because the mother realized that sometimes the strongest bond is not blood but loyalty, not titles but actions, and she felt shame not for what she had done to her son but for not seeing earlier the kind of man he had been becoming. And when the days passed and he was finally released, his mind was no longer filled with pride or freedom but with fear, confusion, and the crushing weight of consequences. And when he learned that the report had come from his own mother, the woman he thought would always cover for him, something inside him collapsed because in that moment he didn't just feel punished, he felt seen, exposed, stripped of all the excuses he had built inside himself. And when he showed up at her door 2 days later, thin, shaken, and broken, he didn't walk in like a son, he crawled on his knees because he wasn't just begging for forgiveness. He was trying to escape the mirror that had been forced in front of his soul, and he realized too late that psychological pain cuts deeper than any physical wound because now he understood that the woman who raised him had chosen truth over favoritism, character over comfort, discipline over denial, and that realization hurt more than the cold floor under his knees, more than the stares of neighbors, more than the words he could not even form with his trembling lips. And as he cried, something strange happened inside the mother because she did not feel victory, she did not feel satisfaction, she felt a deep heavy understanding that sometimes love is not about protecting someone from pain but making sure they learn what they must become, and that is where today's psychology lesson lives, because when someone you love crosses a line, your response should not come from revenge, it should come from purpose. And right now, if this story is making you feel something inside your chest, if you feel tension, anger, or deep thought, make sure you like this video and stay connected to this channel, because the stories we share here don't just entertain, they wake you up, and this is only the beginning of this psychological journey, so stay with me because the truth gets even deeper from here. And from that moment everything changed inside that house, because silence became heavier than sound and the air itself felt like it was holding its breath as the mother looked down at the broken man kneeling before her and realized that the real battle had never been about anger but about awakening, and she lifted his face slowly, not with kindness or cruelty but with a calm that scared him more than any scream could have. And in that calm she spoke words that were not loud but were sharp enough to cut through the lies he had wrapped around his own character, telling him that love is not proven by words spoken in comfort but by actions chosen in moments of inconvenience, and that loyalty is measured when temptation is loud and responsibility is silent. And as he listened, something in his chest began to ache, because for the first time he saw himself not as a victim of circumstances but as the architect of his own destruction, and this is where psychology teaches us something frightening and beautiful at the same time, because human beings are masters of self-deception until reality forces them into a corner where truth has no escape. And as the days moved forward, he was not allowed to run from what he had done, he was not forgiven quickly, he was not comforted easily, because sometimes the greatest gift you can give a person is the discomfort that makes them grow. And while his wife slowly moved from the edge of life back toward fragile strength, the space between them felt like a vast ocean filled with regret, and though he sat beside her bed now holding her hand, the room was no longer filled with excuses but with silence and reflection. And slowly the hospital monitors became not just machines but symbols of second chances, and he learned in the most painful way possible that attention is not something you give when it is convenient but when it is required. And back at home the mother watched him not with suspicion but with observation, because psychology is not about punishment, it is about pattern change, and she understood that real change is not shown by tears but by consistency, by quiet sacrifices, by uncelebrated effort. And this is why the human mind is both weak and powerful, because it can build castles of ego in moments of pleasure and crumble in moments of truth. And as weeks turned into months he began to walk differently, speak differently, and think differently, and not because he feared his mother but because he finally feared the man he would become if he stayed the same, and that fear is the beginning of wisdom. And here is where you as a viewer must pause for a second and ask yourself something real and uncomfortable, because stories like this are not just entertainment, they are mirrors. And if you have ever ignored someone who needed you, if you have ever chosen pleasure over responsibility, if you have ever justified a selfish choice, then this story is more about you than you might want to admit. And that is why, if you are feeling this message deeply, you should subscribe right now, because this channel is built for people who are not afraid to face the truth about themselves. And the psychological power of this story does not come from drama but from recognition, from that quiet shame you feel when you realize you could become better but chose comfort instead. And near the end of this journey the mother finally said something that completed the circle of pain and understanding, when she told him that she did not act to destroy him but to save him from becoming a man she would one day be ashamed of. And in that moment he understood that real love does not rescue you from consequences, it lets you feel them, learn from them, and grow through them. And that is the real meaning of psychological growth, because growth is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is slow, uncomfortable, and silent, just like change happening deep inside the human mind. And as this story comes to rest inside your thoughts, I want you to take a moment and breathe and understand that you are not watching a story, you are watching a lesson about yourself, about your choices, your loyalty, your responsibilities. And if this video made you think even for a second, then do not keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe to the channel, and keep coming back, because the more you understand the human mind the more power you gain over your own life. And if you want deeper psychological stories that expose truth and challenge your thinking, stay with us, support this channel, and become part of a community that chooses awareness over ignorance, growth over comfort, and truth over illusion.